Hello, welcome to today's presentation on the top 7 strategies for managing coronavirus anxiety. Now, today's presentation is going to be specifically on managing coronavirus anxiety, the kind of anxiety that's being brought up by the circumstances that we're going through today. A lot of these will apply to general anxiety, but these are not going to be the kind of tips that you are most likely to come across on Google. These are strategies that I actually use with my clients to help them deal with the anxiety that's being brought up by the coronavirus. So I hope that you have a paper and pen ready because, like I said, this is not going to be stuff that you can easily find on Google. This is not fluff strategies. These are actual strategies that deal with the core causes of the anxiety that's being brought up by coronavirus. It's much more substantial than just simple tips. At the end of the presentation, I will put a link in the chat box where you can see all of the research studies that I'm pulling the information from. Now, this presentation is divided into 2 parts for each type of anxiety: what contributes to the anxiety and what to do about it. And by the end, you'll have 7 things to practice. And you can either practice them all at once every day or choose to do one a day. But the key is to practice because, think about it. Remember when you first started to learn how to ride a bike and you were so focused on not falling, maybe, concerned that your parent would let go of the bike and you would fall. But if you had never practiced riding a bike, you wouldn't be able to ride a bike. And that's the same way it is with stress management. You want to practice it so that it becomes a habit. You don't want to wait until you're stressed out in order to need stress management. You want it to be there and working for you when you really need it. So by practicing, you develop a habit. And by habit, I mean that it happens automatically, it happens naturally, and it happens without effort. Now, wouldn't it be great for you to be able to manage your anxiety effortlessly, automatically, and without effort? So practice these 7 techniques that we're going to be talking about, and you can easily get there, okay? But first, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why you should listen to me. I am a psychologist. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. I've been practicing for over 20 years now, and thanks to my first job or career, I guess, straight out of graduate school was as a Navy psychologist, and they asked me to teach stress management to the medical staff. I am brand new to the military, and I'm thinking, oh my God, these people outrank me. So I did a ton of research and did the presentation and didn't even get halfway through because apparently people think they know a lot about stress management, but we know only the surface stuff about stress management and not really the core about stress management. And so I have been teaching stress management in corporate environments, private environments, medical environments, government environments for the last 20 plus years. I do more coaching than clinical work now, and I have put pretty much everything I know now into my website. So if you're interested in more, I will tell you more after the end of this presentation. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that contributes to coronavirus anxiety is an intolerance for uncertainty. And you probably have already seen this. People who are very concerned about when is this going to end? When are we going to get a vaccine? I'm listening to people who don't necessarily know what they're talking about, saying that we can get a vaccine by the end of this summer without understanding the process of phases of clinical trials and the levels of testing that needs to happen to make sure that we don't have what happens with vaccines that have come out in the past where we rush through it, they come out, and they have to recall it for some reason. The problem is that even though life has been getting better and better, anxiety levels have been increasing. In fact, one study found that intolerance for uncertainty levels have risen significantly between 1999 and 2014. And it coincides with an increasing reliance on mobile phones for seeking reassurance and exposure to uncertainty. Now, keep in mind, this is a correlation, not a causation, not saying that because we're seeking reassurance on our mobile phones that this is leading to decrease in our tolerance for uncertainty, but it certainly goes hand in hand that the more we can't tolerate uncertainty, the more we try and seek out reassurance, and then we're exposed to even more uncertainty. Fear of the unknown is a long recognized deep-seated fear that's present in humanity, and some believe that this is evolutionary in terms of if you were took less risks, that the species would be more likely to survive. But recent research is showing that this is actually a risk factor for developing clinically significant anxiety. So the less tolerance you have for uncertainty, the more likely you are to become clinically anxious. There was a study done during the H1N1 pandemic in 2009, and they found that the higher your level of intolerance for uncertainty, the more the person experienced anxiety and problems coping. So what can you do about it? Well, you want to start by recognizing what you do to seek certainty. And keep in mind, this is different from what you do to ease anxiety. For example, deep breathing eases anxiety, but constantly reading articles on the coronavirus is seeking certainty. Once you start to recognize what you do to seek certainty versus what you do to ease anxiety, then you can start to ease back on the behavior that you're doing to seek certainty. So recognize that sometimes it's impossible to be 100% certain, and kind of keep reminding yourself of this, because that's what's going to help increase your tolerance for uncertainty as well. All right, so write this down. Here's your first strategy that I want you to start practicing, hopefully on a daily basis, hopefully more than once a day. What I want you to do is wait 60 seconds before looking at your phone the next time a text notification sounds. That may sound like it's simpler, easier, but it's actually easier said than done. They've done studies where they've had subjects and they told them, well, we're going to, we want you to try out these different drinks, but we need to keep your phone on the side. They had everybody's phone number and they texted them. It's really a test to see if these people would resist walking over to where their phones were stored to find out who texted them. And let me tell you, it was surprising results that a lot of people really felt the need to go and find out who had just texted them. So this is a little bit of a way to increase your tolerance for uncertainty in a very safe manner. So just wait 60 seconds before looking at your phone the next time a text notification sounds. Okay, so the next contributor to coronavirus anxiety that we're going to talk about is an avoidance of feelings of anxiety. Ironically, the more you try to avoid anxiety, the more anxious you'll feel. And the reason for this is because the act of avoidance itself is a component of anxiety. People who are anxious about something avoid what they're anxious about, and it's part of the anxiety. You're not doing anything to counteract the feelings of anxiety by doing what increases your anxiety, which is confirming that you have something to be anxious about, and so you're going to avoid it. What does this avoidance look like? It looks like anything that will distract you from your feelings. Whether you're having a glass of wine or having a beer or eating or watching TV more than usual. And it's not that these things in and of themselves are bad. It's just that if you're using them so that you don't have to feel any kind of unease, this is a form of avoidance. And these things will only temporarily help, but then the feeling will come back. And it usually comes back worse than before. I describe it to my clients as trying to hold a water balloon underwater. So now you can imagine if you're trying to hold a water balloon underwater, you have to keep your focus on that. You cannot get distracted, because otherwise, as soon as you get distracted, that water balloon comes popping back up to the surface. And it's the same thing with your anxiety. If you are focused on just keeping it repressed, keeping it suppressed, avoiding and distracting yourself from really feeling it, the minute you stop paying attention to doing all those things, it comes back with a vengeance. So what do? You allow your anxious thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations to wash over you. You have to accept that anxiety is an integral part of the human experience. When your anxiety shows up, notice and describe it without judgment. The natural lifespan of an emotion is only 7 seconds. Your mind feeds it, and that's why we experience it even longer. Paradoxically, facing anxiety in the moment will lead to less anxiety over time. So write this down. Strategy number 2 that you're going to start practicing is when you notice anxiety and really any kind of uneasy feeling that you wish wasn't there, just let it be. Don't add to it with thinking thoughts like, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. Justifying, rationalizing, judging, all of these thoughts actually keep those feelings alive. So what do? Notice it. Notice it as if you were watching a puppy play in the grass. So watch your feelings. Where is it in your body? Is it in your gut? Is it in your throat? Is it in your back? Look at it. Is it taking up a lot of space in your body? Is it taking a little bit of space in your body? Is it intense? And just by watching it, you're going to notice it change. It might move to a different part of your body. It might get more intense, less intense. Eventually, it just fades away on its own. It's not to say it may not come back. It could come back, but again, just allow it to be and notice it. All right, next, the third contributor to coronavirus anxiety is existential anxiety. Health threats trigger the fear that underlies all fears, the fear of death. When faced with reminders of one's own mortality, people might become consumed with health anxiety and hyper-focused on any signs of illness. You may have noticed that there are some people who, with the slightest sign of anything that might be wrong, they suspect that they might have the coronavirus itself. I actually know a couple of people who felt like they had the coronavirus, even though the symptoms didn't seem like they were consistent with the coronavirus. And luckily, they did not have the coronavirus. But whenever we have any kind of major health threat, we just get worried that this is it. We've got it. Now, Rollo May was a pioneering psychologist following Freud and Kierkegaard, and he challenged the idea that we can even live without anxiety. He felt that a certain level of anxiety is essential to being human. And in his book, The Meaning of Anxiety, he explores how it can relieve boredom, sharpen sensibilities, and produce the tension necessary to preserve human existence. He proposed that anxiety can impel personal change because it's only by confronting and coping with it that self-realization can occur. By the way, this book is free on Audible. So what can you do? Try connecting to your life's purpose and sources of meaning, be it spirituality, relationships, or a pursuit of a cause. Embark on something important that you've been putting off for years and take responsibility for how you live your life. Focusing on or discovering the why of life can go a long way in helping you deal with unavoidable anxiety. Interestingly enough, today my son is graduating from 8th grade, and the school put a little collage of their last 3 years of middle school. My goodness, what an amazing difference 3 years makes. I mean, I live with him every day, so the changes are not even that significant to me from a day-to-day basis, but to see how much he's changed physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically in just 3 years, just from looking at these pictures, it's amazing. And he's one of the top 1% that was asked to speak at the graduation ceremony. I don't know what he wrote because that's on him to come up with a speech. And so I'm looking forward to seeing his why and connecting that to the pictures that I've seen. So Strategy number 3, look back over your life. Now, if somebody were to look at the pictures, just from the pictures of your life, would they get a sense of what has been your underlying reason for being? And does that coincide with what you believe has been your life's purpose? All right, number 4, the next contributor to coronavirus anxiety is underestimating human resilience. Human minds are good at predicting the worst. Many people fear how they will manage if the virus shows up in their neighborhood, in their family, in their kids' school. They worry how they'll cope with a quarantine, lost paycheck, all the changes that we're going through. But research shows that people tend to overestimate how badly they'll be affected by negative events. And research has shown that people underestimate how well they'll cope with and adjust to difficult situations. So have faith in humanity. We've been through bad stuff before and we can get through it again. You are probably one of those people who are overestimating how badly you'll be affected by this and underestimating how well you'll be able to cope with this. Another is people's failure to anticipate how quickly they'll make sense of things that happen to them in a way that speeds emotional recovery. This is especially true when predicting reactions to negative events. People fail to anticipate how quickly they can cope psychologically with such events in ways that speed their recovery from them. So what can you do? Be mindful that you're more resilient than you think. Think back across your lifetime. You've overcome a lot of obstacles, maybe even some you were doubtful about overcoming, and yet you did. So write this down. Here's number 4 strategy for you to do, and trust me, you will have a lot of opportunities to practice this strategy. Decide to spend at least one conversation for every coronavirus conversation you have talking about an obstacle you've overcome. Now, we have all experienced where we get together with people on Zoom or over the phone, and we're calling to just chat and have a fun happy hour or something like that. And inevitably, the conversation changes to the coronavirus. And I would bet that more times than not, it's the negative side of the coronavirus. And it just spirals down. So for every conversation that you have about coronavirus, have a conversation about how you've overcome an obstacle or successfully achieved something. It's called creating a balance. And you might even want to start your happy hour Zooms with people or conversations with people with letting them know that, listen, I've decided, or you can even blame me. Tell them I told you to do it. Say, listen, for every time we end up speaking about the coronavirus, we're going to talk about how we've overcome an obstacle. Hearing yourself and others talk about overcoming obstacles can help bolster your confidence in being able to overcome this obstacle as well. Number 5, another contributor to coronavirus anxiety is overestimating the threat itself. Now, don't get me wrong, we all know that coronavirus can be dangerous. It has an estimated 1.4 to 2.3% death rate. So everyone should be serious about taking all the reasonable precautions against infection. But people should also realize that humans tend to exaggerate the danger of unfamiliar threats compared to the ones they already know, like seasonal flu or car accidents. So we know that there's a certain level of danger in terms of contracting the flu or being in a car accident. But when it comes to unfamiliar things, we overestimate or exaggerate the threat compared to the threats we already are familiar with. It doesn't help that the media coverage tends to be constant and incendiary, and it contributes to our sense of danger. And this leads to heightened fear and further escalation of the perceived danger. A study during the avian flu found that with each additional hour of average TV viewing, it was associated with a 15.6% increase in the proportion of people worrying about the virus. So what can you do? Long before the coronavirus came into our lives, I recommended to my clients who are more prone to anxiety to limit their exposure to news to no more than 30 minutes a day. And if you were dealing with anxiety even before coronavirus, I recommend not watching the news at all and going to a reputable website, such as the Mayo Clinic, for updates no more than once a day. And even better, have a reasonable friend filter the news for you. If you're really anxious, ask a friend that you know can be reasonable and objective, who watches the news, to just give you the updates. And then that way you're not the one who's inundated with all of the news that's going on. Number 6, not engaging in self-care. Talk of self-care has been around for as long as I can remember. Well, now it's time to put your mom's advice into practice. During these anxiety-provoking times, it's important to remember the tried and true anxiety prevention and reduction strategies. Get adequate sleep, exercise regularly, practice mindfulness, and employ relaxation techniques when you're stressed. Prioritizing these behaviors during the coronavirus can go a long way towards increasing your psychological well-being and bolstering your immune system. Stress and immune system are heavily connected to each other. When you're stressed, your immune system goes down. Tissue repair goes down. A lot of things like digestive system, circulatory system, all of these things change when you're under stress because the stress response is immediate, life-saving response. It's about short-term, saving your life in the short term, not in the long run. So what I tell people, our bodies are always fighting off little bacteria and viruses that are in our bodies all the time. And so your immune system is keeping you healthy. You don't even know that these things are in your body. So let's say, your body's happening to fight off a stomach bug. Well, you know what? If the way our bodies were created, if you were to happen to come across a saber-toothed tiger, your body's going to be like, okay, do we need to save you as a whole, or do we need to keep fighting off this stomach bug? It goes into fueling your large muscles so you can get away from this tiger safely. If the tiger happens to eat you, well, that stomach bug is now the tiger's problem. That's kind of how your stress response system is prioritizing things. So what can you do? Unfortunately, when people are stressed, self-care is the first thing to fall off the table. I always ask people to judge how stressed they are. Are you working out? Are you getting some kind of exercise? Are you moving your body in some intentional way to keep it healthy? And inevitably, if they tell me, no, I'm too busy, or I'm too tired, or I've got too much work to do, I know that their stress level is starting to get out of hand. People who normally do some form of exercise, that is the first thing that they're going to take off the table so that they can engage in more stress-producing activities. It just doesn't make logical sense. I understand that people are busy, they need to get stuff done, but by taking off the table the things that are going to help reduce your stress is not going to make the situation better. It's going to make the situation worse. So don't be one of those people. Engage in self-care. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're moving your body. Make sure you're eating non-processed foods, and make sure that you're practicing stress management techniques. The final contributor to coronavirus anxiety is not seeking help. A 2015 study on anxiety and the threat of Ebola found that while subjects were generally not fearful of contracting Ebola, the fear of this disease was correlated with general distress, contamination thoughts, disgust sensitivity, body vigilance, and anxiety-related physical concerns. People who are vulnerable to anxiety might find the coronavirus epidemic particularly overwhelming. Consequently, they might experience anxiety symptoms that interfere with work, maintaining close relationships, socializing, or taking care of themselves and others. If this applies to you, please get professional help from your doctor or a mental health professional. What can you do? Although you might feel helpless during this stressful time, Following these strategies can help keep anxiety from becoming a problem in its own right and enable you to make it through the epidemic more effectively. Talk to a reliable friend who will listen to you. Find someone who can help you. Find resources that can help you. And above all, practice these 7 techniques. All right, so let's do a strategy recap. The top 7 strategies that you're going to be practicing. The first one, for increasing your tolerance for uncertainty, you're going to wait 60 seconds before looking at your phone. To counteract the paradox of anxiety, that's when we talked about the more you avoid anxiety, the bigger it gets. You're going to feel the anxiety without judgment. Next, to help you cope with existential anxiety, you're going to focus on the why of your life. The fourth, having faith in humanity. I want you to balance your coronavirus conversations with conversations about having overcome obstacles or achieving success. Next, focus on facts, not opinions. Be aware that there's a lot of stuff out there that's not fact-based, it's opinion-based on some fact that they might have gotten from a non-reputable source. So limit your watching of the news and let somebody else filter the news for you. Next, strengthen your self-care. That means focus on making sure you're eating properly, sleeping well enough, getting enough exercise. And exercise is just moving your body, and practice stress management. And finally, seek professional help if you need it. Be realistic about how well you're actually coping with this anxiety. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the chat box and see what kind of questions that you have there for me. Okay, hold on. Okay, so I've got a question here. How do you deal with the anxiety and guilt of adapting slowly to a new routine? Okay, so you have to understand that we are all trying to adapt to a new routine. Anytime we are out of our routine, it's going to cause anxiety. Now, this is something that happens for everyone. We are all having to learn to work differently and live differently and be around people that we're not usually around 24/7. And so whenever anybody is out of their normal routine, it is naturally going to cause some forming of anxiety. So you're not alone. Everyone is feeling this way. And as for feeling guilty, that just means that you are a conscientious person. So the anxiety is probably coming from your wanting to do just as well in the new life now that you were doing in the former life. But you have to understand, we're all learning how to work remotely and have a different routine. We're trying to get work done with multiple people in the household. So if you're having a hard time transitioning from working from home, everything that you're going through is completely normal. It's because you're not in a regular routine, and the more you do it, the more it becomes routine for you, the less anxious you'll be. But the anxiety and the guilt, it only comes from you being a conscientious person and wanting to do just as well working from home as you did working in an office. And that's wonderful, but it's also completely natural, and I wouldn't call it guilt because, I like to reserve the word guilt for you've done something wrong. You haven't done anything wrong. It's perfectly natural when we're not in our routine to feel a little bit uneasy, but you're doing the best that you can. Everyone's doing the best that they can. And this anxiety, don't think of it as something that you should not be feeling. It's a normal feeling, and it's just going to be there until you feel comfortable with your new routine. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? Which one do you think is going to be the easiest for you guys to do, or the hardest? Which one? Okay, so somebody is saying that the cell phone trick might be a little tricky. We'll see if it turns out to be easy or not so easy. Another person saying facing the feelings of anxiety and letting them wash over me. I think that will be the most helpful for me. Yes, if you can do that, I'm telling you, It is a game changer. You will be amazed by the ripple effect it'll have on your life. Someone else says, not necessarily the hardest, but it seems like every conversation I have entails a virus in some capacity. That's right. It's it's almost the new talking about the weather. It certainly has become that way. And I think that's why if you can balance it out with success stories, I was actually facilitating a meeting where the theme was gratitude. And so we talked about what are the silver linings of this? What were we taking for granted that we're now grateful for? And let me tell you, after the first 5 minutes, the conversation started spiraling downwards again. And I had to kind of round and herd everybody back onto the topic of we're focusing on what did we take for granted that we are now grateful for now. So it is very easy for the coronavirus and the negative aspects of it to become the new talk about the weather. So has this been helpful for you guys? Okay, I'm getting yes. Thank you for sharing. Yes, very helpful. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, and the name of that book that I mentioned by Rollo May, it's called The Meaning of Anxiety, and it is available on Audible for free. Any more questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you all for coming and want to let you know where you can get more. As I mentioned earlier, I've put everything that I know about in an easy to learn format on my website, so check it out. And if you're interested in retraining your brain when it comes to managing stress easily, effortlessly, and naturally, check out this Reduce Your Stress in Less Than 5 Minutes a Day program. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your spending your time here with me today. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thank you.